Good morning, everyone. My name is Rob Ferguson. I'm from CIBC Mellon, and I want to start off with a complaint. So I don't know who scheduled me to go after that last panel, but Kyle set the bar up about here for moderators. So I promise you, I'm going to bring it down for moderators to follow. So our panel this morning is about digital transformation and how we're at the beginning of an industry-wide move to reach the front of the tech curve. I'm sure you have many questions about this, most particularly, how is Rob Ferguson qualified to moderate a panel on digital transformation? It's a really good question, and I'll tell you why. In the last few months, with very little effort, I've been able to transform a portfolio of digital assets from a very large dollar value to a very small dollar value, which has been very disruptive to my plans for retirement. So transformation has never been a hotter topic. 2 years ago, we probably wouldn't be up here, maybe due to COVID, maybe not. But the industry, I think, is behind the curve. And we are ambitious to innovate, and which this is important because the consensus of those two is what's going to propel the industry forward. But real innovation isn't about incremental efficiencies and technology updates. True transformation is disruptive and meaningful and will require a collaborative effort to determine the future of the industry by rethinking our goals, our purpose, and exploring completely new ways of doing things and things that we thought used to be impossible. So today, Gary and Ken are going to talk about industry collaboration, emerging technologies, and market structure. So let's get started. And Gary and Ken, if you guys want to introduce yourselves first.
Sure. Ken DiGilio, I'm the CIO at Equiland. I've been at Equiland just about 6 years now. Before that, a multitude of places, but I started my career at JP Morgan. Worked at Robertson Stephens, Morgan Stanley on the wealth management side, and then most recently TD Ameritrade before Equiland, and then in between Robertson Stephens and Morgan Stanley, I co-founded a fintech. So very happy to be here. Thanks to the Casla folks for having us. Thanks for you to moderate, and very excited to do this in person. I've done a couple of these over the last couple of years, and it gets very boring staring into a camera and having you guys stare into a screen. So glad to be here in person.
I'm Gary Clark. I work at Equiland as well in a client relationship management role, mostly on strategic initiatives, and I'm the lead for digital transformation. Prior to Equiland, I worked at Goldman Sachs for 19 years, managing their product development business with securities lending, as well as actually trading the product on supply and pricing and trading strategies. For that, I don't want to give away my age, but I worked at Salomon Brothers in a funding capacity. Let's leave it at that.
So let's start with industry collaboration, and Gary, we'll start with you. Talk about the state of the securities lending industry and sort of what's on top of mind for you.
The securities lending industry has really reached an inflection point with regard to collaboration. Good creative solutions come from shared goals, and it's really important to have that type of process where we're all working together. A recent example of this, where Equiland, along with members of our community, created a digital working group. And people show up just like in the panel here. Hey, digital. Let's talk digital. And then first question is, okay, what's digital? What are we doing? We didn't want to lead with digital in technology. We really wanted it to be a business solution, a business problem that had a digital solution attached to it. And as you can imagine, the members came back with a large number of, hey, we could fix, and started really thinking outside the box, which was great. But over time, a consensus formed, and we knew the direction that we wanted to go. And internally, we're calling this Project OneSource. But that consensus is really gained through the collaboration of the entire team from all the firms. These are agents and borrowers and others, and that collaboration led to a start in the digital transformation process.
Great. Anything to add to that, Ken?
Yeah, I guess there was two parts to that. Sort of what's the state of the industry and on digital transformation, and then my thoughts on collaboration. So I guess just by a show of hands, Rob opened with, he thinks our particular industry is lagging behind on this curve. By a show of hands, how many people agree that we're lagging behind? Wow. I don't think that was enough hands. I think we're clearly lagging behind. And I talked about some of the places I've grown up and worked at. For about 10 years, I supported the cash equities business, and they had a real imperative and a mandate, whether it's the sheer trading volumes, the fragmentation across exchanges, the margin compression, Reg NMS. They had real imperatives to do something, and I think they're way ahead of us on the automation front. And then for about another 5 or 10 years, I supported the retail businesses, retail brokerage and wealth management, and they have millions of clients, individual clients that demand a certain client experience, and they had to give them that client experience, whether it be for the individual clients or the FAs and the whole move of robo advisors. So they had an imperative, a mandate. I think we haven't had that one big thing that had threatened to tip us over or make us feel some sense of urgency around this. But call it death by 1,000 cuts, call it pick your poison. But if you look at our increasing volumes, if you look at our shortened settlement cycles, some of the efficiencies we have in the middle and back office, if you look at our need to unlock the world's collateral and put it to work. Last night I had the pleasure of sort of going to a couple client events, and there were a bunch of, I don't see them in the room today, there were a bunch of millennials and Gen Z, the next generation of our leadership, drinking last night. I don't see a lot of them in the audience today. You should wonder what that means. But a bunch of them that were 1, 3, 5 years out of school made comments to me about, sort of how surprised they are about some of the manual processing they see going on. So, we got to fix it. I think we have a real imperative now. But to Gary's point, it's going to take a lot of collaboration. That could be in the form of working groups. That could be partnerships. That could be interoperability. I think we're going to see a lot more, consolidation and M&A activity in our space. But the one thing that's going to underlie any form of collaboration is going to be the network. And there's networks out there. The people in this room make up that network, whether you're on the buy side, the sell side, beneficial owner, vendor side. We got to lever this network and the people in this room to do that collaboration. But that's hard, right? Sometimes we have trouble collaborating with our own firms between technology and the business. This is going to mean collaborating across the industry and across the network. We're going to have to, it came up in one of the earlier panels, we're going to have to converge on some standards, maybe look at and leverage things like the common domain model. We're going to have to build and deploy some robust APIs. People are going to have to make serious investments in sort of sunsetting some of our legacy technology platforms that are out there, because I think this industry is plagued by 20 years of technical debt that's dragging us down. We're going to have to write some of that tech debt off our balance sheet. And then I would say most importantly, we're going to have to figure out the governance around this, right? Having a real business case, having some business sponsorship, and then the Rubik's Cube is always how do you take those business cases and get some tech prioritization and get some tech budget and get some tech resources. So we're going to have to figure that out, and it's going to be hard, but I think the network and the people in this room collaborating is going to be the trick.
Right. Before I forget, or I already forgot, please remember to download the app, and you can submit questions through the app as we're speaking. Moving to emerging technologies. So let's talk about data and emerging technologies, given that data is growing at an unyielding pace. We hear a lot about real-time, decentralized data. Can you share more about what you're thinking about data and how you foresee it changing the industry?
Yes, certainly the data proliferation is driving, I think, a bunch of the digital transformation agenda. I carry around some stats that are probably aged now, but they'll still be impactful. 90% of the world's data was apparently created in the last 2 years, and 2 years from now, the amount of data we have right now will double again. So think about how big of a drive that is. I think the big tech firms have figured it out. I think our industry, and not just sec lending, but financial services, hasn't quite figured out the way the big tech firms, how to harness that data and how to monetize it, more importantly. But we need to, right? So not the traditional business intelligence decision support, but all the pre-trade analytics we need to do pattern recognition and AI and machine learning, and how do we take that and do predictive analytics and try to figure out what's going to happen next so we can do some pre-trade processing. And then on the trading side and the transaction processing side, it's not only about big data, it's about fast data, right? So you mentioned the word real time. I'm not sure our understanding of real time has sort of caught up to the rest of the industry. I mean, we talk, I still go to many meetings where clients are talking about the overnight cycle and the batch and mainframes, and I see marketing propaganda out there about products that are real time, and when you sort of peel back the onion a little bit, real time is really 5 or 10 minute intervals of FTP file transfers happening behind the scenes. And I think we got to change the narrative. We can't think of that intraday stuff as being real time. We got to think about it as intraday. We worry a lot about things that have to be done in 15 minutes, by 15 minutes you have to do such and such. And I think as we architect the future platforms, we've got to just think more, we got to think grander than that, and we got to build systems that are more extensible. So I guess the example I'll give is everybody knows that DTC is moving from T+2 to T+1. So again, a show of hands. How many people think it's going to eventually go to T0? Wow, still not enough hands. I think it's absolutely going to go to T0. Whether it's going to be on my watch or not, I don't know. But as we architect, we shouldn't be building for T+2 or T+1 or quite frankly T0. We should have the mindset as technologists. Now no hands are going to go. How many technologists are in the room? We got to fix that. There should be more technologists in the room. But what I preach to the technologists of the world is we've got to be designing and architecting systems that sort of have the mindset of the trade is the settlement. And if you build for that, even if you never get there, if all of you are right and we never get to T+0, at least our systems are architected right and are extensible.
I think the technologists are still at the bar left from last night.
There's an AWS summit happening, so maybe we should have invited some of those folks.
And how is the real-time decentralized data transforming cloud and API offerings?
Wow, that was a nice setup with the AWS summit.
Yeah.
I guess here, as I would say, I think the cloud is not only enabling some of this digital transformation. I don't know how we would be on this digital transformation journey without it, right? So there's nothing magical about AWS or any other cloud provider. To me, it's just another data center, but it's the cloud native paradigms that come with AWS that allow you to have a sandbox to spin up capacity on demand. Things that used to take 6 weeks to rack and stack a machine to do a POC now take seconds or a minute. So it's a playground in the sandbox where the technologists can innovate and do R&D and do POCs and do that without a lot of capital expenditure up front, and then fail fast and shut it all down if they need to. So I think cloud is the foundation, but what it allows you to do is then experiment with AI and machine learning and high performance computing, and now we're experimenting with DLT and blockchain. I think without the cloud, we won't be able to do that. But to some of your opening comments, I don't consider these emerging technologies to be the transformation. They are the fuel that feeds the engine of transformation. The transformation is really about all of us kind of reimagining our workflows and the way we work and our business processes.
Right. Thanks. Let's turn to market structure. So we know market structure is changing. The ways in which customers and stakeholders engage in the market are changing the securities lending industry. Gary, how are you thinking about market structure, and what do you think the future looks like?
So the future market structure is really bright. But before we get there, let's talk about where we are today, right?
Sure.
Current environment, traders book to their own proprietary systems. Systems sit in their own shops, and there's this bilateral process where folks have to actually reconcile and ensure that they're talking about the same thing. As life cycle events come up, they're going in and they're making those changes. So that leads to an opportunity for breaks. So what's the cost of those breaks, right? Well, obviously it's the human capital. It is also trader time where they could be making money, researching economic breaks. They could be making bad decisions off those breaks. There's all sorts of risk in the book that they're creating, billing problems, so on and so forth. shared data, going back to collaboration, shared data is really the way out, right? So by ensuring that that both firms are going off of the same source, you ensure that, and collaborating and sharing all of that information, you're really ensuring that you won't have breaks going forward. And that, going back to what I was talking about, that working group, right? There were half a dozen or more great ideas, from beneficial owner information all the way through to corporate actions and pricing and settlement. But where the group really wanted to focus was on the day in and day out life cycle events that cause breaks. The intent for the future, and this happens in other industries, there's technology out there, new technology out there, that allows for this. Securities lending business doesn't have that, right? So there are other markets where this is part of their daily workflow, and they don't have to spend all the inefficiencies trying to reconcile and using valuable time to do that.
Right, thank you. And Ken, how do you think the trading venues or mechanisms will change?
Look, I think I would anchor the answer to that question around the drive for transparency, and I think there's a big desire for transparency, and whether there's the desire or not, I think our industry will have no choice. The regulators are going to push us towards more transparency in securities lending, and I think with a venue you get that transparency and you get some automatic trade reporting and things like that. So I think we're going to see the move from bilateral multilateral has already happened. Still amazes me that not 100% of all the trades done in this space aren't done on a venue for the initial contract inception. I think we'll see that change, and I think you'll see just a more push to get things on a venue. But to Gary's point about sort of shared data and a single source of truth and life cycle events, I would personally like to see life cycle events to a contract. So anything that changes the economic value of a contract, anything that actually changes the state of a contract, also be done on a venue or a venue-like type of paradigm. And I think we'll see that happen over time, and I think that it'll alleviate sort of the breaks that we see out there in the world. So I think part of the working group that Gary's referring to is thinking about trying to figure out how we get some of those life cycle events on a venue-like platform. I think the other thing that's happening out there is there's this conflation happening of traditional stock borrow loan with repos and synthetics, and I think us as an industry, and especially technologists, as they architect the next generation of platforms, have to be really thinking about delivering platforms versus point solutions, and that can be done physically, that can be done with abstraction layers, but if we sort of have the mindset of platforms versus point solutions, I think it'll make the transformation and the road to it a lot easier. I just want to touch on sort of some of the things Gary talked about with the new technology out there and this single source of truth concept. So in one of your prior questions you talked about, I think the question was, how was real-time data and decentralized data driving some things around cloud and API? We get this question about centralized or decentralized data a lot, and there's this big thing going out there with DLT, and the D in DLT is distributed. But I think it's the wrong question. I think it's less important about whether it's centralized or decentralized and whether it's owned centrally or federated. The more important thing is Gary's point around, is it shared? And is it curated? And can everybody trust that they're working off the same image of the contract at any given point in time? Does it have some shared reference data around it? And then maybe most importantly, do they have some common processing logic laid on top of the shared version of the truth or the single source of truth? And when you start talking about single source of truth and shared processing logic, you think things like DLT and smart contracts. So if there were technologists in the room, I hope they would agree that I don't think we need DLT or blockchain to solve any one of these specific problems we're facing. But I do think it leads to optionality and extensibility and essentially future-proofs us against what's going to happen out there in the world with this movement to DeFi and this movement to potentially Web 3.0. And to your joke about cryptocurrencies, where is that going? And is the central banks going to adopt them? Are we going to tokenize what now are physical and fiat assets? So if you think about all those things that may happen, but we can't really predict, and I'm like you, I would get it completely wrong if I tried to predict it. We've got to see if we can lever things like DLT to future-proof us against all those things and where they might go.
Right. That wasn't a joke about cryptocurrency. Gary, market structure transformation, how does that provide agility to deglobalization?
Well, despite the rhetoric around deglobalization and about privacy, and as Ken just mentioned before, a lot of what blockchain would offer in terms of security and privacy, that you need that in crypto because what's behind it is a handshake, right? The participants around the room here all know each other. They have credit departments that deal with each other. So that's less of an issue. I'm just trying to back up his point here. That's less of an issue in terms of what we're thinking of, but again, it's something that could be necessary for the future. But what's clearly apparent is that shared data is the way to go. And that shared data will allow for a transformational process for the industry that allows the industry to continue to grow, become more scalable, and become much more efficient.
Right, great, thank you. Justin, are there any questions through the app that I clearly advertised late? No, okay. Are there any questions in the audience? It's a chance for all the nerds to shine. Come on.
I can assure you I'm not a nerd, so I just wanted to ask a question. Not sure if you're aware of, so ISLA are working with ISDA and ICMA to create a common domain model, and I just want to know what are your thoughts on that new digital infrastructure for the future of our business?
So the Equilin team has spent a lot of time with ISLA on this exact topic. We were part of their original working group. We actually presented at their showcase, and we were involved in the POC they did. I guess it was in 2021 or late 2020. So we've been very actively involved with them. As we go to the next step with this working group and the One Source initiative that Gary is referring to, we're going to stay close to them. I believe that if we're going to do a POC around transformation and single source of truth and potentially with DLT, that would probably be the best use case to leverage what ISLA is doing around the common domain model. And we could potentially, Equilin in the industry, I think, could potentially be the biggest consumer of the CDM. If we go forward with this. So yeah, I think it has promise. The thing I've sort of argued a little bit with David and the folks at ISLA about is no one's going to adopt the common domain model to either retrofit existing plumbing or to incrementally improve any of the legacy systems. It's just not going to happen. There's no budget and prioritization to do something like that. But if you do something big and meaty and transformational, I think we'd be silly not to try to lever it.
Other questions? This one there.
Hi, Brian Lamb, Equilin.
That's not fair.
Two questions. Can you talk a little bit about interoperability with other players in our industry? Competition, vendors, clients, hedge funds, you name it. That's one. And then if people want to get involved in the working group, how can they contact you and get involved? Thank you.
Yeah, so interoperability is clearly something that our group is looking to achieve. That is for, other participants in the market, different exchanges, whatever. I mean, in order for this to work, it really has to be one source that folks are coming to. It doesn't make sense to have it created in all different places. So the goal is to make this completely interoperable, following a certain protocol, of course, but having all the data consumed within this one source. With regard to joining, I'm around. I'll happily talk to anyone here. You could reach either Ken or I, and hopefully our information's in the book, but if not, Alexa, who is our representative here in Equilin Canada, can help you put in touch with us, and we're happy to talk to you about it.
Other questions? Okay. So, we've got a few minutes left. What do you want to leave the audience with? What can they look forward to?
Yeah, hopefully we impressed upon you the importance of digital transformation. Like I said, this technology exists in other parts of the world, in different businesses. It is something that we think is very portable here. And so what I would like you to think about as you're going up the doors, okay, how much more efficient could we be if we didn't have the, for lack of a word, the baggage of inefficiency that comes along with keeping two separate, disparate sources of data. Shared data is the way to go.
Yeah, I guess referring back to some of the things that were discussed earlier, if I think about digital transformation, I actually think the D part is not new, right? I mean, I like to tell people Ekelin was born digital. We've been doing that for 20 years. It's the T and the transformation part that I think is the new, the hard, the exciting part. And if you sort of take the themes out of today, the things we need to lever to get there are going to be the network. It's going to be collaboration across that network. It's going to be nimble and agile in the ever-changing market structure. This market structure is going to continue to evolve. I mean, you asked me a question about venues before. I mean, there's the sort of manual way to do some of this stuff today. There's the NGT way. There's systems out there that are more bid offer, central limit order book, you know, which one wins the day. We should build platforms that accommodate all of them and are able to sort of build some smart order routing across those type of paradigms. But collaboration, the leverage of emerging technologies, and the willingness to sunset some of our legacy platforms and being nimble with the market structure, I think, are the three most important things we need to do to be successful.
Great, thank you. I want to thank both of you for sharing your thoughts, for being here today. I want to thank everybody for listening. I do want to add that it's really nice to see you guys in person again. It really is. The next topic is hot regulatory topics. Hot topic, I think I bought my suit there. No. Hot regulatory topics and market trends, moderated by Steve Everett. Steve is going to bring the bar back up for moderators. Thank you very much.
Hey, Rob, just one quick thing. I mean, not a lot of hands went up when we asked for questions. My bosses did, unfortunately. But if people want to catch me, I'll be here at lunch. If people want to catch me on a break and sort of talk about anything deeper, or I'm more than willing to do it. Unfortunately, I'm not able to stick around for any of tonight's events, but if you want to throw me an email or hit me on LinkedIn, I'm more than happy to always have discussions on this topic.
I can, for anyone that doesn't get a hold again today that wants to, I'll be around tonight for sure. Come see me or any of my Ekelin colleagues, and we'll happily point you in the right direction.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.